To us. I'm Rob Starr, along with my esteemed colleague, Mr. Chris Davey, and we are the hosts of the Water Zone, and we're glad that you tuned in today. We got a great show coming up, and Mr. Davey is out in California. I'm out in the Phoenix area, and we have another lady that we'll bring in just a minute from Central California. But Mr. Davey, how are you doing today?
We're doing awesome, buddy. Rob, thanks very much. I'm still getting used to the 1 hour difference between us, and so I hope I don't mess that up coming up. And I told you a little earlier today we're expecting the rain to come in here in Southern California, but so far, buddy, the sky is failing us. It's blue out there with a few wispy clouds, and that's it. So not expecting much.
We're supposed to have rain over the weekend. My wife had scheduled a window cleaning service that comes every couple months to do all our windows inside and out, and they called and said, hey, it's going to rain. Do you really want us to come now? And then 2 days later, it's going to rain. So we canceled it till after the storms. But anyway, let's bring in Miss Chris Austin, and she is the purveyor of Maven's Notebook, and she is the maven of all water news that we know of. So, Chris, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you guys doing today?
Awesome, Chris.
As you know, we had a great week last week. We broadcasted live from the Irrigation Association Expo in Long Beach, and that was a great show. And we're very happy for the participants who were on that, which was Ingy Bisconer, who was the outgoing president, and another person companies was winning the Vanguard Award, and that was Valley Irrigation, and that was headed up by Tyler Fields. And then we had Dan Winterton, who is the Director of Marketing for the Toro, who is the CEO of the Irrigation Association. So it was a great show, great conversation about a lot of stuff, and a great show. And I'm sorry we missed you last week, but when we do remote, it's kind of hard to. So anyway, so Chris, tell us what's the hottest news of the week.
Well, I think.
Give us the dirt.
La Nina.
Yeah, we all just love a great El Nino, La Nina story. So, and they've been predicting La Nina for several months now. La Nina kind of means sometimes drier than average conditions in Central and Southern California, but it's not always the case, and that happens mostly when it's a strong La Nina event, but it doesn't seem to be emerging. La Nina is the cooling of the ocean waters. So we'll see what happens, what that means for our water supply. Although I'll tell you, if you really look at the charts, El Nino, La Nina doesn't really mean a whole lot for our water year. We've had El Ninos that have been very wet. We've had El Ninos that have been drought years. So It can go either way. So we'll see.
What else is happening? I hear there's an expansion of a reservoir for about 136,000 acre feet.
Yes, they're going to expand the San Luis Reservoir, which is in Central California, sort of south of Stockton, by a little town called Los Banos. And, this is another off-stream reservoir, so it's not blocking any river. And this is a joint federal-state reservoir, so they just sealed the deal to raise the dam, and that'll add, as you said, 136,000 acre feet, and they'll need to realign part of a road that goes around. It's a highway that goes around the reservoir, but they've set this in motion. There's already work going on at the dam for earthquake retrofitting, so I believe that this is going to make the timeline a little faster to get it completed, since there's work already underway. We'll see how it goes. Probably, to me, the most stunning thing was there is very little opposition to this project. Now, touch wood, and there may be litigation that will follow, but in general, water storage projects generate a lot of controversy, and it's surprising that this one didn't. And so, and I think that if it doesn't get any opposition, it's probably because this is an off-stream reservoir, meaning it's not blocking a river. You're not going to be inundating any towns. Nothing's going to, they're just going to make this a little bit bigger in this. So it's pretty non-controversial. So hopefully it'll stay that way and give us some much-needed storage here in California.
That's a good deal. And, we have J.P. Robinette, who's one of the lead engineers for the Sites Reservoir project. His water zone segment is coming up next month. So we'll be sure to start telling our listeners to listen to that one. But you know how I do, Chris. I follow the money, right? So I saw from California Department of Water today on the DWR site. I don't know if you've got it on Maven's notebook yet, but it looks like the city of Los Angeles has approved almost $750 million, $740 million for a wastewater to purified water drinking plant in San Fernando Valley. Did you know about that?
Oh, yes. This has been a big story that's going on, and They were very much interested in the direct potable reuse regulations that were recently just approved, meaning that they'll be able to recycle the wastewater into drinking water and, put it rather directly into the aquifer.
Yeah.
So it's hailed as a great way to make Los Angeles more resilient, and I think it's a good move. It's an expensive move, but what's interesting is that because they're building this plant, it has the potential to reduce Southern California's reliance on the Colorado River,
right,
which has project partners. I'm not sure how many or how much, but I do believe there's contributions from Nevada and Arizona to the cost of this plant. So that they can, in exchange for, leaving some more Colorado River water behind. So,
well, we all need water, so I'm cheering that along. I'm glad that's moving along. Sites has some conflicting people who don't want that to happen, but you have, as you said earlier, every project has its pluses and minuses of people who like it and don't want it, and but at the end of the day, we need the water.
Yeah, and I think off-stream reservoirs are less impactful.
Right.
And, what's interesting about the Sites Reservoir is that they've pretty much lined up their funding, and it's from a wide variety of folks,
sure,
large and small. And so they want to build this reservoir. They're willing to pay for it. But yes, they are facing opposition from the environmental groups, and we'll see how far they get. I think that from the environmentalist point of view, I think they just feel that California's hydrology is so altered and has messed things up so much that we just need to stop. Sort of like that theory, if you're, digging a hole, the first thing to do is stop digging. I think that's they're operating on that theory, but, not all water storage projects are created equal. And it seems to me that Sites has a lot of good things going for it. So we'll see how it goes as it wends its way through the process.
As Chris said, we'll have J.P. Robinette, who's the head engineering guy for that project. But we also had the opportunity to talk to California Secretary of Natural Resources, Wade Crowfoot, and he'll be on right after J.P. Robinette. And so that should be some good discussions on really what's happening inside of what's really happening. So we appreciate that. Anything else? Any other good or bad news that you know of?
Well, it's California water. I could go on and on and on, but I think you have a segment coming up after me.
Yes, we do. So anyway, we're going to hope that you're back with us next week as always.
Oh yes,
we appreciate that very, very much. For anybody listening, if you haven't been to www.mavensnotebook.com, you got to go. You got to sign up. You get data every single day and articles about what's happening in water in California. And as I always say, Chris, I don't know how you sleep at night, because with all the typing and stuff you got to do to put that thing out every day, it's amazing to me. And so we do appreciate that. And if you want to become a sponsor of that, please do so. I'm sure she'll appreciate that, and that's your choice. But we sponsor her, and but she's a wonderful lady, personally, and we appreciate her. And so, Chris, you have a great weekend, and we'll see you and talk to you next week.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Have a great week, Chris.
All right, we're going to take a little break and have one of our sponsors. It's from Site One Landscape Supply, and then we're going to come back with some special guests, and we're going to have a great conversation expanding that. So stick around. We'll be right back.
This fall, the partner points will add up like never before with Site One's Fall into Points promotion. For a limited time, earn triple points on all FX Luminaire products, as well as double points on Hunter valves, sprays, and nozzles. Hunter and FX Luminaire, industry leaders in irrigation and lighting, are here to make sure you're getting the quality and performance your projects and customers demand. Plus, for the first time ever, customers in the Hunter Preferred program will earn 100 Hunter Preferred program bonus points when they buy $1,500 or more of FX Luminaire or Hunter products at one time. Get ready to fall into points this September and October at Site One.
All right, welcome back to the second half of the Water Zone. Everybody's having a great afternoon. And I'm going to introduce one of our favorite friends, and he's going to introduce our special guest as well. And his name is Lou Bendon. And Lou, how are you doing today? Lou?
Yes.
Okay, you can take the mic now.
Okay, great. Hi, how are you? My name is Lou Bendon. I want to thank the sponsors of the Water Zone and Rob specifically for allowing this conversation on the water industry, climate change, and carbon. And today we have a guest, a very special guest, Tom Ferguson. Tom is the managing partner of Burn Island Ventures, which is an early stage venture fund focused exclusively on the water sector. This is very unusual. The water sector doesn't really attract as much capital, venture capital, as one would hope. Burn Island Ventures closed their first $30 million fund in February 2021 and have invested in 18 companies supporting founders building solutions across the water value chain. I met Tom previously when he was Vice President of Programming at Imagine H2O. Imagine H2O is an accelerator specific to the water industry and is unique. Tom holds an MA and honors from the University in Edinburgh in Scotland, thank you very much, and an MBA from the Harvard Business School. So, Tom, welcome to the Water Zone, and thank you so much for participating in this conversation.
No, my absolute pleasure. It's really lovely to be here and great to hear you all. I'm a big fan of your show.
Just real quickly. So, Tom, I have to ask you the question. So, I know you're from Scotland, and then you went to Harvard. Sure. How do you get your accent straight?
How do I get my accent straight? I'm one of these odd Scottish people that sounds English, so the accent's from London. I did all my schooling until I was 18 in the south, below the border in enemy territory. And then I was up in Scotland for university, and my parents are still on the West Coast. But I actually spent 8.5 years in San Francisco before defecting to the wrong coast about 2.5 years ago. So I'm coming at you from Brooklyn. So it's all a bit of a jumble.
Well, Mr. Chris Davey, who's the other host here, he was born in England and spent a bunch of time there. And I'll let him chime in after. But go ahead, Lou. Continue with your discussion.
So, how did you wind up at Burn Island? Tell us about your climate journey and how you got there.
Sure. Well, you're very kind to name check Imagine H2O. It really is an extraordinary organization, kind of based out of San Francisco, but it's pretty remote these days. It's the best accelerator for early stage water technologies that's out there. It's been going for 13 years now. And I had an extraordinary formative experience there running the accelerator. I just got a good feel for how high the quality was of people who were starting companies within the water sector. And by 2020, really the caliber of those entrepreneurs was really very high indeed. And there was just a big gap of a specialized fund for early stage water founders. So to be able to meet their entrepreneurial talents with a fund that could make a real difference in the trajectory of them building their companies. And so I thought, well, why the hell not? And built an argument at the end of 2020. I started putting it in front of people in 2021, and then we formed Burnt Island Ventures, and we put our first fund into business. So that's really what the genesis was. It was just trying to create the fund that I wished existed while I was running that accelerator.
Yeah, what really impresses me about your portfolio is how broad-based it is. It covers everything from irrigation to energy recovery and so much more. Talk to me a little bit about that portfolio and what your thinking was behind in developing it.
Sure, absolutely. From a certain perspective, you could look at this and say, wow, that is a very generous interpretation of all things water. But we don't think that there's anything odd about it at all. No, this is a $1.4 trillion a year industry just in terms of CapEx and OpEx. This is enormous, completely foundational. And it's just as important to Rio Tinto as it is to Taiwan Semiconductor as it is to the LADWP. This is just a foundational substrate of our existence as a society. And so if it didn't show up all over the place, if we didn't have a very broad portfolio, I think that would actually be a lot weirder. But the real thing we need to ask ourselves is like, do we actually have enough expertise across all of these areas of water? And we think we've built a team to really be able to do that. I mean, I'm blessed to have. It's just me for a while, but I'm blessed to have two fantastic partners in Christine Boyle, who's up in Seattle, and then Steve Close, who's in Colorado. Both of them are really consummate professionals. Christine's probably the best software person in water. Steve is probably the best hardware, particularly around treatment, person in the investment world that really is out there in the market. And they're both working alongside us. And so what our quest is to find the best entrepreneurs in water wherever they happen to be working. So if they turn up, like Shane Dyer did at Irrigreen in just outside Palo Alto, or if they turn up in energy recovery, like Matt Swindle, who was in Oregon and is now in Pennsylvania, then that's where they turn up, because the impact of these technologies, everybody's always sort of banging on about the actual technology itself, which is obviously important. But you can take one check at the patent office or all the amazing technologies that haven't worked, and you know that the determinant is actually the primary decision maker, especially early. And so if you want to identify a company that can go and manifest the promise of a given technology, what you're really looking for is an entrepreneur. And so what binds all of these companies that we've backed together is really the quality of the entrepreneur and the entrepreneurial team that they've put together in order to make the potential of a technology manifest in the market. We're very proud of the portfolio, but you are right to point out that it is diverse.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me because having worked as a mentor for the Clean Tech Open for 13, 14 years and only working in the water space, Yeah, there's so many perceived barriers for early stage companies and to get the attention of the utilities specifically. How do you help them with that?
Well, on the utility side, the first place that you always need to start is just to, if you're an early stage company, is to be careful. Utilities are really interesting organizations because they're not in competition with each other. It's not like it's two banks trying to compete over providing lower interest rates to people who want a car loan or whatever it might be. Their nexus of competition is the quality of the treatment that they actually undertake. So whether it's drinking water or wastewater, they're actually in competition with what comes out of the faucet or with what comes out as effluent into discharge into the natural environment. That's really what they're battling against. And so in that context, the incentive structure is a little bit unpredictable. Just saving them some money isn't enough for people who are unbelievably dedicated, under-resourced, and overstretched in terms of time. It's not enough to say, I can save you 0.2% of your operating budget. It's not going to be helpful. What you need to find is a solution that is going to fit into the way in which they structure their day, the way in which they experience the world, that can remove a significant amount of pain from that experience. And it comes from all over the place. It's not just hardware. A good example is our largest investment in Fund 1, which is in a company called Doppler, which is Daupler. They actually do a huge amount of work for the city of Oakland. They're kind of the emergency response management system for the whole city of Oakland, and they do extraordinary work. But really, where they put themselves into the utility stand is in terms of emergency response management. Now, you probably remember the flood in the Bay Area a couple of years ago in January. At that time, no call center or no emergency response unit in any utility that is used to taking, call it 40 to 60 calls a day, suddenly you've got 20,000 calls all in the space of 4 hours. You're not responding to any of those. What Doppler provides is an automated system to be able to use natural language processing to be able to take in this incoming information from the customers within a utility's catchment area, to then be able to accurately triage it and then send those scarce resources, those response trucks, to the people and communities that need it most. And it's that kind of thing where you have an entire kind of workflow that can be replaced essentially by software that saves a huge amount of time and money and headache and difficulty, especially at a point where a utility is under the most duress. But we also work with technologies that are leap forward in terms of the underlying chemistry of reverse osmosis and next generation coagulation systems and all of this stuff that is going to be pertinent to the utility. But where people get into problems of selling into utilities is that they're not working on a problem that the utility cares about enough. If you're working on a problem that a utility does care about enough, then a utility can be an absolutely spectacular customer and move really very fast indeed. For example, utility who sell to small utilities, including a number in California, their average time to close for one of their sales is only 44 days, which is lightning fast for software.
Insane.
So yeah, you just need to be offer a product that they really, really need.
Right. Right. It's interesting what you're saying to me. I teach consultative sales. I've taught consultative sales, and the premise behind it is that nobody wants to buy anything. I go, Tom, I got something for you, and the first thing you do is you put your hand on your wallet. What you want to do is solve a problem.
Run
and
far away.
Exponentially more important with the utility because they don't have any time or space for, chit-chat. They're just really interested. They need to focus on their mission. And you have to put yourself inside their head and understand what their real problems are.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that one of the ways in which this kind of pops up is that a lot of entrepreneurs complain about utilities. They complain incessantly that there isn't enough funding, utilities are too slow, Lord forbid they would blame themselves for not being, good enough to actually pick apart the puzzle of being able to get to within a utility. Now, look, like for the preponderance of sales to a utility are genuinely quite difficult, but you can design a company around that. You just have to make sure that when you do make that sale, even if it does take you 18 months, that what gets sold is worth it. Does it have an overall gross revenue profile and a margin profile that it actually makes economic sense for the company to go through that process? But like we promise, everyone that's sort of just in the idea formation stage, if they are curious about utilities, as long as you are there at the top of their priority list and you've done the work to understand exactly what their real priorities are, and can you retire something that is a serious difficulty for them, then there is no reason why you can't build a very large company indeed. And at the same, and the great thing about investing in water is that once you do have very large companies, what you have is very large impact. It sounds very self-serving that you can have your cake and eat it, but you literally can. We're eating an awful lot of cake as our companies are getting bigger, because each of them represent the 27 companies soon, 24 at the moment, that we've already invested in. Each of those represents a solution to a given problem in the water sector. So as they get big, so does the solution. It's really great.
So it takes me to the problem that I've been working on with water utilities, trying to highlight the need to decarbonize as a way to reduce their impact on climate change, because the energy required to pump, treat, and deliver water is equivalent to that, is a carbon footprint equivalent to that of the airline industry, or about 5% of total carbon, which is significant. And there are many utilities, certainly in the West Coast, who have made, carbon reduction goals, have climate goals. And one specifically that I've been working with is East Bay Mud. And they were a client of mine for 6 years, and I still work with them, but just for fun. Talk to me about the importance of water in the context of climate change, and how does it fit into this whole conversation of entrepreneurs working their way in with solutions to help utilities address this problem, because they do have goals.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And the data's kind of up in the air, but we might be using slightly different data sources. But if you look across the GIZ and the IEA, I mean, the number we use is that the water sector, and this includes the methane emissions from things like flood irrigation and rice paddies and all the rest of it. So it's maybe a little bit further and beyond. But we think the water sector is responsible for about 4 gigatons a year. And if you put that up against kind of aviation, which is a 1 gigaton a year, water is 4 times as pertinent to the world's emissions profiles than the airline sector, and people spend precisely no time talking about that fact, which is really dangerous. And so the way in which we do what we're doing is because we're looking for this alignment of very high-quality entrepreneurs, we don't necessarily go straight at the core of kind of the GHG emissions potential. But I was just at Stanford at their climate ventures class. I was very honored and slightly nervous to be able to go and talk to all these smart people. And we sort of took them through this presentation. And one of the observations that we had is that there is an amazing live laboratory on their doorstep in California. In the Bay, it consumes about 5.6 gigawatt hours. Around Sacramento River, 2.6 gigawatt hours. San Joaquin River is 1.3 gigawatt hours. South Coast is 21.4 gigawatt hours of water use. It's 20% of the state's electricity, 30% of the natural gas for business and home use. This is real stuff. This is real emissions abatement. Really, for the main issue, that water is heavy, and water is an absolutely miraculously good solvent. So when you put stuff in it, it's very hard to get it out again. And that all just takes a a large amount of energy. But we really think we're standing at the bottom of the hill. We just invested in a great company called Aquamembranes, which in the same form factor. Now, I'm pretty sure all of your listeners are pretty well informed about the water sector, certainly relative to a lot of people I have been speaking to for the last year. But the classic reverse osmosis element. So aquamembranes essentially enable 20% more membrane to be packed into that element, which increases the treatment capacity of that element by 20%, while also reducing the energy needs of that unit by 20%. And so you get 20% swing in both directions. So it's interventions like that are plug and play, ready to go, ready for scale, that we think can take a meaningful chunk out of all of this. And then one other I would mention is that, yeah, sure, it's direct in terms of the water treatment train, but something like Cala Systems, which is a next generation heat pump water heater. Water heaters account for 3% of US emissions. We think that there's $23 billion of wasted consumer spend on excess energy use from water heaters alone. Just because the incumbents, and there are three of them, who form a nice little oligopoly, which hasn't moved for the last 40 years, basically, just because they can't be bothered to actually, well, it's not really can't be bothered, they've got an incentive structure that limits the likelihood that they can actually design around the heat pump to actually secure the energy efficiency benefit. And along comes Cala Systems just outside Boston to be able to redesign the heat pump from the ground up to capture the efficiencies of that heat pump. And this is just a great thing about technology, is that, as smart people focus their minds on given problems, products get better, performances get better, and hopefully, obviously, emissions go down.
And what's the outside view of VCs and capital specific, and capital in general, specific to water? How do they see it?
How do they see it? They don't. It's very strange. One of the things that I've always found most interesting about water is that it's so obviously unbelievably important, and everybody ignores it. Now, I think the reason that they ignore it, once you actually point it out to them, there are two bodies of capital, and we'll start with my sort of fellow venture people. So they're obviously investors, and they're looking for things to invest in. And in general, their network provides them with opportunities that look a reasonable amount like the opportunities that they've already had. And this is not an exaggeration. There is only one mainstream venture firm, and that's DCVC, who have Earl Jones as a partner, who's a real multi-decade water pro. But he is the only water person in the venture industry outside of water specialists. It is absolutely bananas. And so we sort of wonder why there isn't more venture dollars going into water. It's because nobody understands water, and nobody thinks it's worthy of pursuit to actually go and understand it. That's changing actually in the last 6 to 12 months. We've had some really interesting people genuinely make a concerted effort to actually turn themselves into water specialists, which is very encouraging. But then there's also a body of capital, which is the people that, I receive my money from, which is the limited partners, the people who are providing capital to venture capital firms in order to go and fund the sort of next horizon of whatever it is they might be doing. And it's a similar problem. People haven't really thought about it. But what's encouraging is in the last 18 months, we've seen a fairly big shift in people waking up to this fact that, whatever we've done to the climate, we have got to start thinking very, very seriously about adaptation and resilience. And when you're thinking about the impact of climate change, water literally is the medium through which climate change is going to be experienced. We think it's 70 to 75% of the impact of climate change. And nobody has funded squat. It's 1.25% of just climate change venture funding has gone for water. Overall venture funding is about 8 times the size of overall climate funding, and we are 1.25% of only climate funding. So we're plowing a slightly overlooked and we think underappreciated furrow. But it does mean that it can only go upwards from here, and water is too important to be ignored forever. So we think we're building ourselves into a very interesting position at a time when we're seeing a real inflection in interest and the commercial possibilities in and around the fundamental molecule.
You know, what you're saying really resonates with me. We did a lot of market research in the water space on the conservation side, but also on trying to mitigate demand. And at the end of the day, people have enormous amount of confidence in the water provider, and specific to water zone and their landscape background, to the landscape contractor as well. They expect the water. They don't think about water unless there's no water coming out the tap. And it's boggling to me because they think more about the PG&Es of the world and energy than they do about something as critical to their life as water. And it never made any sense to me, but have a leak, have no water, then you get everybody's attention.
I mean, it's really interesting if you look at it just quickly on that. If you look at it through the lens of kind of cognitive biases, so the way in which literally our brains work, we're kind of hardwired. If you can take something for granted, you will, because of recency bias and the availability heuristic. It's why it's so shocking when you expect water to be there and you turn on the taps. And this has happened a couple of times to us in Scotland when there's been a clog in the spring and all this kind of stuff, or the borehole in one of our neighbours' houses goes out. It becomes a real problem really quickly. But because of the genius, and I don't use that word lightly, the genius of the people who run our public utilities, who take no credit in the press, who spend all of their time actually trying to stay out of the press, who take basically no credit for it. What they've achieved and continue to achieve to allow people to ignore water in the way that they do is nothing short of an extraordinary modern miracle. But it winds me up every day to say people like, oh, interesting niche to me. And I'm like, yeah, you see how much of a niche it is. Turn your faucet or your shower on. Turn your faucet and your shower on in the morning. You'll find out how much of a niche it is, sunshine.
Right, and have your lawns go brown because we're in a drought again, Nino, whatever you want to call it. But we will turn your lawns brown, and I made a fair amount of money. We will enjoy doing it. Yeah, exactly. Oh God, have your cake and eat it too. It takes me to the conversation. I've been working on this for a while, and from the outside as a retired person trying to help stimulate a market transformation within the water space, and working with people, George Hawkins and Clifford Chan are going to be on next week, just to talk about these things. But and they're total leaders in the space. But it dawned on me that we keep talking about the utilities, and we should, because they manage the water. But the flip side of that conversation is on the demand side. And the people sponsoring this, the people behind this, are all in irrigation. And according to what the AWWA says, is 58% of all urban water use is for landscape, and half is wasted. So all that wasted water has to be acquired, treated, pumped, lost, treated, delivered, and wasted. They seem to be part of the problem as well, yet, we're not talking about it. So, what's your thoughts? Because I know you've invested in irrigation, and, some of this is consumer-based.
Some of this is consumer-based. I mean, the Irrigreen, which I brought up earlier, is this extraordinary company, which has essentially applied the principles of 3D printing. So the fundamental problem of irrigation is that you're trying to cover squares with circles, which geometrically doesn't make a lot of sense. When you actually cut the numbers, essentially what you end up is using about twice the amount of water that you really should be using. and Irigreen have a certificate from UC Fresno, their Center for Irrigation there, that certifies that they cut the amount of outdoor irrigation in half. And I think, in a way, you kind of would expect that this would be the outcome, right? Water is still really very deregulated. It's still extremely cheap. And when you're thinking about if somebody has a campus in, whatever it is, San Luis Obispo or whatever it is, how much time do they spend thinking about their water system versus their lighting system or their cooling system or the actual building envelope or whatever it is? It just doesn't get to the degree of priority that is until something goes wrong that actually manifests within the building itself. So Layer is a very interesting example of a highly flexible water leak detection solution. That's LAIIER, based in London, run by a wonderful guy called Matt Johnson. And water is always ignored until it shows up. But if it's buried in the ground, the problems are underneath it. If you have a leak, okay, fine, sometimes you'll get squishy grass, fine. But in general, it's just falling away underneath. So out of sight and out of mind. So, there is obviously the water itself, and then there's the energy associated with the pumping of it, and people always want to reduce it. But it's a very interesting overall conundrum, which is why Irigreen has to be absolutely brilliantly branded, and that there is something fundamentally really cool about seeing a single sprinkler head drawing the outline of whatever it is that needs to be watered, whether it's a flower bed or a lawn or whatever it is. But it literally draws, it throws water to the contours of that irrigated space. It just looks super awesome. And that's kind of what it's helpful, because that's the kind of thing, stuff that people get noticed. It shows up on, Instagram and TikTok and all the rest of the information channels, that stuff in water is not used to being present on. But this is something that we keep an eye on.
So where is this all going to go? I mean, it's obviously you're in an early, I would call it early stage, because you're doing something unique. There's no two Tom Fergusons that I've seen out there. You think this is? I would say, do you think it's going to happen? Obviously, you do, or else you're going to put your life into it. But how's it going to go?
Yeah,
what's the process look like?
But there aren't that many sure things in life. But as I look at the commercial potential in and around water, and actually really the commercial potential is only downstream of actually making the system better. We just don't have any choice but to make the system better. By some measures, literally the US's water system has aged out, right? The piping system on average is 46 years, 46 years over a 40-year useful life. The dams, the bill is coming due on the dams. The water treatment plants, on average, are only 5 years behind what they were actually designed for. The bill is just becoming due, and if you extrapolate that out to Europe, as well as the rest of the kind of global north or developed nations or whatever you want to call it, like the infrastructure that we built from the end of the Second World War into the late 70s and then stopped building is toast. We're done. And we don't have a choice.
And that's the new infrastructure. That's the new infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a new... Yeah, exactly. I'm from London, and everybody's really proud of our Victorian sewer system. And I'm like, it's a Victorian sewer system. What? Why are we happy about this? It's very impressive. It is also many centuries old, which is not a good plan. But then the global south, the developing countries, they haven't built their water infrastructure yet, let alone the sanitation infrastructure. This is a global project that as people pull themselves out of poverty, there will be enormous demand to be attached to reliable, clean running water and obviously sanitation. Their lives are going to get enormously better, and I cannot wait to see it. And then the project of literal renewal of what is beneath our feet in order to allow the people who have become very, very used to the benefits that water provides into their lives. In order for that to maintain, there has to be an absolutely enormous project undertaken that will happen gradually. It will happen gradually over time, but we are seeing it accelerate. We have seen it accelerate since 2020. It's inexorable. It is going to happen. Like, we like to say that, look, people are either going to get it sooner or they're going to get it later, but they're going to get it eventually. Like, you can't continue to ignore this because we've got a fragile system and we have an 18-wheeler freight train, choose whatever heavy mode of transport you like. But whatever stasis, whatever equilibrium we found ourselves in terms of water molecules, that train is being driven straight through the middle of it, and that train is climate change. We are fundamentally ill-equipped to deal with what we have built into our lives. You only need to look at the coast of Italy and Spain, just in the last 2 weeks, to look at what we are now going to be asked to cope with. Whether you look at northern India or Pakistan, or the fact that we have to move Jakarta. But this is an insane undertaking that has to be achieved in order to keep people safe. And so people say, what's the future of this? And the future of this is that this cannot go anywhere. It cannot go anywhere but get more important. And, it's a real, for me and the team I am blessed to work with every day, an extraordinary bunch of professionals. It really is this sort of enlivening force. Because we get to work on a secret that I think that we think is hiding in plain sight, but people really haven't quite figured it out yet. But to be here while people are just starting en masse to figure it out is a tremendously energizing place to be. But over time, the most catalytic thing that we can do, is to prove that there is money to be made here, that there is returns here. Because if we can prove that, then more and more people will provide their capital to the sector. More experiments will be run. As those experiments are run and companies succeeded, more talented people will come towards it. There is a flywheel that is just being set in motion and been running for, I would say, the last 6 to 7 years. And we're just at a very interesting inflection point in terms of the creation of the technologies that are going to be transformational in terms of our ability to cope with what's coming.
One of the things I keep telling people, there's no new water. But the industry has come up with a creative way to reuse water. And and they did it because they had no choice. There's no new water. I mean, I've worked and was paid to work for over 4 droughts, serious droughts in California. And the reality is that these people are a lot smarter than me, and they're looking at their supply and they're going, where's it going to come from? And that drives it. You talked early on, you were talking about people solving problems, and the problem is, how do we get more water when there's no more water to be had?
Yeah.
So
it's truly it's truly tough. The good thing is obviously the energy is getting cheaper, and so pumping is going to get cheaper. And so ideally, we're going to be able to, once we push these things, and if we do get into real scaling down the various cost curves of these things being able to get cheaper, you're going to be able to have water manifest in places that at the moment it's very, very difficult to have it manifest. But there are lots of changes that need to be made in order for that to happen. People need to get good at an awful lot of things. People who provide permits have to get better at providing permits, and people who build pipes have to get better at building pipes, and, etc. But it's all coming. It's all coming. But the urgency of what's needed, and as you could, if you're just thinking about the groundwater situation in California at the moment and the degree of subsidence, the lack of recharge, and all the rest of it, this is a problem that is here and now, and solutions tomorrow, or many years from now. There's a timing mismatch that I hope we're not too late for large-scale damage. There's lots of things we can do. There's lots of things that we can do, and I think, as urgency comes, and hopefully as people who work in and around water and people who are experiencing water issues, it really does need to be part of particularly their political voice. We're really bad at telling our story in the water sector. It's a real shame. It's probably the biggest thing that holds us back. If you look at the degree of support that the renewable energy sector, the legacy energy sector receives, water gets absolutely bucket compared to them. And it's just a result is that we're not noisy enough. We're not noisy enough in Sacramento. We're not noisy enough in Capitol Hill. We don't tell the right stories. Frankly, we don't use our power in the way that we should. But as it gets scarier, that's where we need to go. We need to make sure that this fundamental idea that climate change is water change, and that if we are going to survive what's coming, we need to get much, much better at supporting the work in and around the water molecule, because it's the foundation of everything, from healthcare, general issues, of racial issues, to the ability of communities that have been together for hundreds of years to be able to remain in place. Where generations have been there and generations have been brought up, and that's really worth preserving and it's worth fighting for. But we haven't got good at it yet. I'm glad you've got George and Clifford coming on. They're two phenomenal storytellers for our sector, two of the very best. So, they can do a much, much better job than I can.
No, George is probably the best speaker I've ever run into. So, and you want to talk about passion, he's the man. Anyway, I really thank you for this. Rob, do you have any questions for Tom? Rob, you still here?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. I had my mic on mute, so I wouldn't interrupt anybody. Real quick, Tom, when your people invest in a company, how long do you wait before the balance book changes from red to black? The return on investment.
Yeah,
what do you like to see? No, I'm just curious.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for sure. We're not afraid of people burning money, and the natural order of things is that people are still spending more money than they're earning for, usually at least 3 years after we make our first investment. Right. But like anybody else, we really like positive unit economics. In fact, no, not like other VCs. Other VCs are very happy with setting fire to many hundreds of millions of dollars if it means a promise of enormous rebounding many hundreds of millions of dollars the other way. We prefer sensible company building. So we're investing in a couple of companies that will be profitable next year. And we like companies that are built that way because it provides predictability to customers to which they are providing the service. But yeah, we don't like money bonfires. That's what we don't like.
Okay. Chris, are you in?
I'm right here, buddy.
Okay, we got about 1 minute left if you want to ask a quickie question. Get you in.
I don't. I was afraid to ask a question because you introduced me as a red coat at the beginning of this show, Robert. So, you're from London. I'd love to talk to you about a bunch of stuff, Tom Ferguson, but I just want to say I appreciate you coming on the show, and maybe we can get another chance to talk in an upcoming show.
That would be wonderful. I really appreciate you all having me, and congratulations on the great work you do.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Chris and I always tell our listeners we enjoyed you checking in with us. And the most important thing that we tell you every single week is please help keep our planet blue. Because if you like green, you got to have blue. Good night, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
NBC News on KCAA Loma Linda, sponsored by Teamsters Local 1932, protecting the future of working families. Teamsters1932.org.
ABC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook. The confirmation process of President-elect Trump's pick for Attorney General might be rough. Senator John Cornyn of Texas says he wants to review the House Ethics Committee's investigation of Matt Gaetz.
I think there should not be any limitation on the Senate Judiciary Committee's investigation.
Gaetz, who's been serving as a Florida congressman, resigned days before